Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this another conversation of the Policy Panchayat, where we have guests who are doing very interesting, incredible work in the broader public policy and social impact space. Join us for quick conversations on their career journey, some of the principles that they follow and how they've seen the space evolve. Today we have someone who leads policy initiatives for Snapchat in India, who was a part of the first batch of LAMP, right? The very first batch, yes, if I'm not wrong, and has seen an absolutely incredible journey, especially within a lot of these cohorts and circles. So thank you so much for taking out the time.
Yash, thanks so much for having me. I will say that your building over the last many years has, deeply inspired me as well. So very, very happy to be here and happy to be of help.
Thank you so much. If you could just quickly give an introduction for audiences, and we'll get started.
Sure. My name is Uttara. I currently head policy for Snapchat in India and South Asia. I worked in technology policy issues for about 8 years and in public policy for about 13. Yeah, very happy to be here.
How did you, and every time I ask this question, last week I was chatting with Rohit, who works at Zoom, right? Again, someone we know from LAMP. And whenever I ask people this question, very wildly different answers in the sense, how did you discover public policy? That there's something known as public policy, right? And how did you get started here?
So yeah, honestly, Yash, it's a pretty unremarkable start for me. And what really got me started was an accident, right? I think especially in the first years of my career, I don't know that I had the ability to be very intentional about my choices. I sort of went where the wind took me, right? I needed to get a job. So I would sort of look at things that were within the scope of my interests and my skills and sort of follow that. So I'd finished my 3-year BA honors degree from LSR in the year 2010, and I was keen on working for a bit. And I had no idea of the specific type of job I wanted to do, but broadly, I was keen, as many people at the time were, in the social sector, right? It was a time, I think, around then especially, where a lot of the people that I looked up to were, for instance, working in jobs in the UN or the World Bank. And they often, come to college and even my high school, for instance, and speak very eloquently and passionately about their jobs, right? And how it helped other people. And that broadly was something which sounded like what I wanted to do, right? And I had no real clear on how to make that happen, but that was just my general scope of interest. So as you said, I did the LAMP Fellowship before it was actually even called the LAMP Fellowship at that time, right? So I was part of this email list in college. I was doing a diploma program on conflict transformation and peace building. And that particular course had a mailing list. Someone on that mailing list sent us all an email that simply said, would you like to assist a member of parliament with policy making? And this was when I had just graduated and I was looking for work, right? And I guess that was a pretty compelling flyer. And I just applied, got in, and not quite realizing the tremendous impact that decision would make in my life over the next few years. I finished the LAMP Fellowship, and as you know, a fantastic job of training us in research and placing us with an MP, and over a period of a year, really getting a ringside view of the lawmaking process, right? So it was a really, really fun 1 year. And post that, to be honest, again, right, it was just 1 year after college and I was very much in an exploratory phase. I dabbled in other sorts of policy and policy adjacent roles. For instance, I did a 6-month volunteer program with the UK DFID. Right. I did a very, very short, embarrassingly short stint at CPR. And I spent a year at GIZ, which is the German government's development agency in India. And being perfectly candid, I was jaded quite fast, right? Something about the combination of my personal circumstances at the time and my state of mind, plus the types of organizational cultures that I was exposed to, didn't quite alchemize for me, didn't quite work out. And I remember actually quitting GIZ, not knowing what I would do next, right? Which is a pretty terrifying thing for a 23-year-old to be in for some reason. So I was in the job market again, okay? And I needed to work, as all of us do. And again, the LAMP Fellowship Facebook group or WhatsApp group, I forget which one it was, put out a job or a role in the office of Rajiv Chandrasekhar, who at the time was an independent MP, right? Again, I was like, okay, this sounds reasonable. I applied and I got in. Okay. Again, that happened to be a very, very pivotal experience for me. And the reason this was so was because as a member of parliament, Rajiv Chandrasekhar was really, really into technology issues, right? At the time, I personally had no idea what some of these words, right, like net neutrality, what they even meant. Okay. But he was a tough taskmaster. He had high expectations. So the team, including myself, felt very accountable to the briefs he gave us. Right? What happened as a result of that was that I had a 3-year solid gig where this was also, interestingly enough, very fortunate. It was a time when there was so much happening in tech policies, right? It was like a turn had just happened. We saw we saw Section 66A, that verdict being passed in the Supreme Court, the landmark judgment, right?
Yeah.
Then the Aadhaar judgment also, a lot of the most interesting proceedings were being debated at that time on the UIDAI and the veracity of Aadhaar, etc. And beyond these three issues as well, which were huge, right? There were also many, many micro debates on issues like encryption and privacy, and even sort of the beginnings of sort of competition policy reform.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In a sense, that Raji Chandrasekhar gig for me was like just a solid training ground.
Yeah.
I learned about the tech policy ecosystem broadly. I increased my spatial awareness, right, of who exists in the ecosystem and how they all interact together to pull off like policies, right? And I understood how different stakeholders, from civil society to companies to trades, etc., were influencing outcomes. So it was a bit deeper in a sense than the LAMP year, where I just got a sense of how Parliament functions. And then soon after this, I applied to Amazon, and I got, and it was a cold email. I know you're a fan of cold emails as well, and sometimes they work out, and it's really lovely when it does. Again, with Amazon, the good thing was that it's a gazillion companies rolled into one, right? We've got video, e-commerce, ebooks, cloud, music streaming, and a bunch of other smaller sort of in development phase sort of products as well. Right? So in a sense, spending time at Amazon and then AWS gave me a really good understanding of like B2B businesses as well as B2C businesses. And importantly, Amazon also has this amazing focus on like writing and thinking well. And the level of complexity posed not only by the issues that a company like Amazon was interacting with in tech, but also just sort of the organizational complexity, I think sort of really, in a sense, consolidated a lot of my experience over 4 years. And then, as you know, of course, 2 years ago, I moved to Snap, which is a different sort of challenge altogether, considering it's in the space that we understand as social media, but been very fun and similarly challenging as well.
Can I very sheepishly admit I had no idea just how popular Snapchat is in people of a certain demographic? Like, I swear to God, right? I feel old, when I just discovered that, oh wow, okay, it's exceptionally popular in it, maybe 16 to 22-year-olds, so whatever, roughly there.
Yeah. It's actually a pretty common response that I get from, especially from policymakers, by the way, because they're completely not the Snap generation, right? So we said this publicly as well. A large chunk of our population, especially in India, are between the ages of 18 and 24. Right?
Precisely. So there is. Okay.
And we have 100 million users in India, so it's quite big. Although it's not, the function of the app is not quite like Twitter where you see wide debates. So, people don't register the scale pretty often.
It's just very popular, like very engaged users, not just. But keeping that aside, how have you seen this space evolve over the last, especially I would say, post 2014 in a sense, right? Like 5-7 years after, because in terms of jobs, opportunity, it's a very different, completely new space, I would say, right? From the time that you've seen. From the times you were in LAMP.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, when I saw this question you asked, I thought it was such a great question as well. So just stepping back for a second, right? I realized that internet penetration in the year 2014 was about 15% or so in India. Okay. Today it's at about 49, 50% as of 2023, right? And in a sense, and of course, the pandemic caused a massive acceleration as well, right? Of people adopting internet and internet-based services. So in a sense, I feel like just that fact, we've all witnessed that, right? You can literally see how much ubiquity there is of tech services in the country across a lot of jurisdictions, right? Obviously, we know the world over, regulation does not keep pace with innovation, right? But even then, obviously, governments all over the world will try to keep pace with innovation through regulation, as they should, right? And this sort of shift, I think, has had an impact on jobs, right? Obviously, especially in the technology space, what I have witnessed is that it's gone from being a nice to have function to one that is essential from the perspective of providing regulatory certainty, or at least direction for companies, right? So most companies, especially if they're operating in a complex regulatory environment that we often will see in our part of the world, or even EMEA, for instance, companies want to understand how regulations will impact their operations, right? And they want to make sure that they're kosher in that regard. And therefore, it's become a much more essential function than it was, say, 10 years ago, right? Now, in terms of impact, again, I remember, for instance, in 2010, maybe the only team at the time that had a policy function was Google, okay, in 2010. And then shortly after, Facebook and Twitter and others follow suit. The teams, even then though, right, the regulatory environment wasn't quite what it is now or has been in the last 5 years. And the regulations weren't moving as quickly, right? So to your question again, in terms of impact between 2015 and now, Yash, you know this really well as well. We've seen regulations formed on online content, on privacy and data protection, on net neutrality. We've seen hardcore debates on regulations for complex verticals like fintech, for e-commerce, for cloud, gaming, crypto, many other things as well missing. Right? And this was sort of literally in the middle of an evolving, complex discussion on competition in the digital economy as well, right? So really what has happened is that some of these macro factors have resulted in a lot of acceleration in regulatory debates. And that obviously has provided a ton of opportunity for anybody who's looking to work in technology policy, right? And frankly, it's kind of cool because today, if someone's starting out, you have this broad frame, right, of issues, verticals, so you can actually explore your interests and maybe even identify specific verticals. For instance, privacy or competition, if that's your thing, or you really want to become a solid expert in a specific vertical. Or otherwise, you can develop sort of broader horizontal expertise on, like, just sort of advocating through this large and variegated landscape.
No, totally. In fact, it's, there's a common joke in the tech policy circles that the personal data protection bill gave us tech policy folks employment for a decade, and then digital India bill will be there for the next decade. But
that's true. This is true.
But no, keeping that aside, sticking to tech policy, right? What in your opinion, right, are some of the larger tech policy issues that India, not issues, but in the sense, subjects, right, that India has to tackle with, and what, if any, are best practices that we can probably learn from other jurisdictions?
Yeah, maybe I'll address the thing about the big questions first, okay? And then talk about approaches, and maybe there isn't a consonance between the two, okay? Because frankly, so the two big questions are so complex that I'm just not an evolved enough person to be able to hazard a guess, okay? I think the first big thing for me is access and inclusion to digital services, right? So the question really is, how can we ensure that everybody, regardless of their socioeconomic background or geographical location, has access to the internet, right? And bridging, in a sense, this digital divide that we speak of, especially where online access is quickly becoming like crucial for accessing things like education, job opportunities, or even just civic participation for that matter, right? So that's sort of from what are our baseline things to solve for the next 10 years? I still think that even though we have sophisticated debates about emerging technologies, this sort of fundamental issue is worth more people putting their time to. So that's one. The second is a bit more complicated. Okay, actually, I don't know. It's a one that's difficult to talk about. I'm sure you relate as well, given your Twitter experience. I feel, Yash, that the tech policy sector has become a device through which tensions between democratic values, individual rights, and sort of societal well-being are being negotiated, right? And that, to me, is the core of a problem that has been a thing for the last 5 years and probably continue to be for the next many years
as well. It's become the staging ground.
Absolutely, right? So we're seeing this in debates around the data protection bill, on content, and by the way, not just in India, everywhere in the world, right? Things like content regulation, artificial intelligence deployment, I think questions around ethics and risks, for instance. And frankly, even in things like competition policy, I feel like these sorts of broader questions are being played out, right? And I guess to your point as well, this is a broad problem statement. What is the way to address it? Okay, now theoretically, I think a policy professional might say that, hey, more consultative approaches might improve the quality of the discourses around these issues, right? But as we all know, this is a very political thing, right? And there's something to the culture of how we all talk about big questions and the extent to which we give equal space to every single type of stakeholder that needs like a lot of improvement, right? I feel like the quality of discourse on the big questions of our time pertaining to tech policy, in the way that it's played out online and even in the real world, it needs a lot of improvement, right? And I feel like this is more a behavioral human being thing than a like a theoretical advice about, oh, more consultation, right? Because something fundamentally about how we are needs to change for us for this to get better, I think.
Agreed. In fact, just how you mentioned, right, Ithra, like a lot of this is principles-based sort of, regulatory approach, which helps, and because the space evolves at such a pace that you possibly can't specifically in detail regulate, the smallest of things. It just has to be more of a broad-based thing for regulators to keep pace with the evolvement. What does, and this is another that I really want to hear, because I've been on that same side, but maybe my framing of this differs in the sense, what does a GR job mean, right? What is government relations? What is public affairs? Right? What does the job entail?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'll be honest, yeah, I'm not particularly attached to either label. Okay.
Yeah.
My sense is that a policy rep for a company plays the following roles. Okay. The first role that I think a policy rep for a company plays is that of a corporate diplomat, right? So really we're trying to ensure that the company has equity with government, okay? And that the government understands the value proposition of the company and how we contribute to the country, right? Whether it being tech, whether it being jobs, whether it being like, a new innovation that we're helping the ecosystem sort of adopt and proliferate, etc. So that, understanding the company per se. The second, I'd say, is like a public policy advocacy role, right? So where we're literally helping shape the regulatory environment and help the company prepare for regulation, right? And this, of course, it's two-pronged, right? So externally, you want to say that, for instance, XYZ law has the following three problems, which would be bad for India's ecosystem, and therefore advocating for alternatives that make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Then equally, also sussing out what's really going on in the regulatory environment, and then communicating that in a way that the company is able to internalize and prepare for in terms of compliance.
Yeah.
Right. So reading the book, which is often very complex, and helping the company leadership sort of understand that.
Yeah.
So that's the second part. I'd say there's also a third thing, which is about like firefighting, right? As ex-Twitter perhaps here across as well, sometimes problems arise, right? And as especially pertaining to government or other allied agencies, and the role of a public professional is to firefight those issues, right? And truthfully, I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like if you're doing your corporate diplomacy work well, there's probably going to be fewer fires in the first place, right? But sometimes things are outside of our control and we have to sort of manage that as well. But then again, I think the last point is about, like, I was going to say that, look, some companies I know will also do all these three things that I just mentioned, add like a comms angle, a communications angle. I've actually personally never played that role, so I'm unclear what that entails. But yeah, I hear you on the nomenclature. I think that there's this whole thing about government relations where you're basically just building relationships and nourishing relationships with government. But there's also this thing about like hardcore policy advocacy, looking at a law and seeing what does that mean for your company, etc. And then advocating for the company's interests as well as the broader ecosystem's interests. So there's a few different things here, in my opinion.
Couldn't agree more. Just one thing I would maybe again double down on, this something mentioned already, which is to make your nodal ministry of the government at large realize that, hey, we are a legitimate stakeholder, right? You're about to regulate this sector. As a sovereign, you have the right to. So there's no discussion on that, right? But it impacts our businesses and our consumers and citizens equally. So it at least we have the right to put forward informed viewpoints on how some of these things work, and then you can take the call. What's best for this. Yeah. So I just feel sometimes it's just like this becomes very important, that legitimacy in that sense. But what skills might and just again, I think this is in continuation of what you were mentioning about a bit of a comms work. Like, for example, at Twitter, most of my work was around partnerships, right? We had senior manager looking into GR, So what skills might such a role entail for someone who wants to work in this? And if you can also add, are there opportunities for impact that such a role also affords?
Are there opportunities for, what was the second part of your question?
For like a broader social impact sort of a thing that such a role affords.
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me answer the first part first in terms of what the required skills are. Okay. From my perspective, the first thing is about being able to read a policy well. Okay. So looking at policy documents, and they're often these really long, really granular documents. So how to read a policy, that's important. How to analyze that particular policy. Okay. And specifically, if you're interested in working for a company, it needs to be an analysis that is from the perspective of the business, right? So basically, you want to be able to ascertain how X policy, say data protection, for instance, how that impacts your company's bottom line in terms of cost, okay, but also like in terms of spend, in terms of like compliance changes. If the product needs to make some changes, being able to call that out preemptively, right? And if there are some things that are basically not even feasible to do from a technical perspective, being able to sort of broadly call that out. Of course, you can't be overly technical as a policy person, but over time that becomes a crucial skill, right? Then this is really second really important part, and I think especially as the years roll by, this becomes a really important thing, is to be able to communicate that risk to the business operations in a really balanced way, right? So sort of this very delicate dance between not alarmist, but also not overly placatory, right? You want to be really even-keeled about the way you're communicating how real the risk of some policy becoming law and enforced in much amount of time is. That's the most, I find that especially with companies with fewer resources, they're really keen to understand, hey, okay, all of this is fine, and all of your intellectual analysis aside, what really does this mean for us as a company? Like, what do we do and when? Being able to communicate that, and it's often a really difficult thing to do, as you can imagine, right? So that's a really important skill, is discernment, right? And actually, the reason that this flows to the next skill, I think, which is like business writing.
So
business
important.
writing, it's so important, and it's so different from the very verbose kind of academic style of writing that a lot of us in policy can sometimes, especially in our early years, adopt. So sort of that business writing becomes a really important skill for a public policy person in a company. And then the other two things I'd say, Yash, again, super important, working well with other people. I think a policy person is working with a variety of stakeholders inside of the company, right? People who are engineers, people who are business folks, communications people, marketing people that don't speak the same vocabulary. So working well with other people is really important. And also sort of building relationships externally, right? So it's not just about your company and that entire constellation of relationships. It's also externally. There might be 10 or 15 key people in government that need to be, well briefed about your company's operations, who you guys are, what your value proposition is, and your, to your point earlier about building legitimacy, right? So that effectively means you're basically talking to other people a lot. So being good at that helps a ton, right? And the last one, obviously, because tech is changing so fast, and we've seen even in the last like 2 years, right? I mean, AI has changed the way we think about so many regular policy issues. So I think staying up to date is a really important one as well.
Agreed. In fact, I'll just double down on the previous point that you made about working with others. Also, a very small incident. I remember I was hiring on behalf of Twitter for some other role based out of Singapore, and the recruiting manager, right? I asked her that, what should I judge this candidate on? And she said something. She said that if someone has made it to the interview stage at a place like this, Yash, right, then that person is technically qualified to do the job, right? All that you're trying to assess in an interview is a cultural fit. Is this person interesting? Are they kind? Are they empathetic? How do they communicate? Can they get along with a diverse workforce, a global workforce, right? And that to me was really like, it's something that just stayed with me. I was like, okay, yeah, fair enough. Like, technically you can do the job, but yeah, so you're testing for some other skills, right? Very underrated again, right? People just think that, you need to know XYZ or have these XYZ skills in that sense.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. If there's a couple of things that you could change about, the broader policy social impact space in India, right? Things that, you might have noticed over the last roughly decade or so. What would that be?
Yeah, look, generally, I'll say it's a great space. A lot of smart and interesting people doing a lot of good work, especially the last 5 or 6 years. We've seen an ecosystem of so many interesting people doing such interesting work and being very entrepreneurial, right? So in general, I'd say it's such a cool space. So it's not as if it's a big gripe or anything. The one thing that I think is worth, just as from a mindset perspective, considering, right, is this whole thing about IQ versus EQ, okay? I think that public policy is obviously a very, very cerebral sort of space. Everybody is very intelligent, everybody is very credentialed, right? And everybody is constantly engaging on things from the perspective of the intellect. Right? So you're analyzing policy, you're understanding what it means, you're communicating impact. It's very like brain-focused work, right? And I think sometimes what happens is that an over focus on the intellectual. I mean, intellectual rigor obviously is super, super important. It's not to undermine that, right? But I find that often something that is not talked about enough is, again, what we said earlier, right? Like one of the core things about being effective in public policy is about building consensus. And the way to build consensus is to build trust and have good relationships, right? And the way to do that is to have high EQ, so over a long period of time, building trust with people who are from different backgrounds, who are not in your organization, who don't have the incentives aligned to do your bidding, etc.
Yeah.
So in a sense, having EQ and understanding what other person's incentives or their perspective or their motivations, their desires, and trying to bridge across a variety of ecosystems, that to me is the real work, right? Like, are you able to go to a government office and speak with someone in a compelling way? Are they able to hear you, right? And that has much less to do with how sharp you are, because frankly, my bet is that most people in the space are already very sharp.
Absolutely.
It's more about a softer thing about like, how are you saying the message? Do you understand them? Are you able to read the room? Things like that. So I'd say this whole thing about EQ is highly underrated. And I'd say that perhaps that's one quality that a lot of us could look to intentionally cultivate.
Agreed. And just, this is a recent incident that I noticed. I think we also need to normalize a lot of conversations around things which are maybe strictly not technical, right? Like, for example, that, alongside like some 99% of the team, I was laid off, right, last year on Twitter. And it was such a journey for me, not just to normalize this conversation that, hey, it's a job market, you're a resource. Sometimes you are in one, right? Sometimes, you're in between jobs, you're in transition or something, right? And you can always find something else to do, right? You can always learn more and be somewhere else. Like, it's nothing that you need to sit and analyze as if the rest of your life is over, something like that, right? This is a very normal thing. That's why they use the term in between jobs, for example, right? Similarly, I see with a lot of people in this space, they're like, every single day I need to see the impact of my work. And I tell them it's not possible. I'm sorry, right? Even at an NGO, it's not possible, right? A lot of the work that you do will be admin, right? Or will be just to keep
actually, especially at an NGO, it's not possible. You're right, because it's a much longer term change.
Right. So these basic conversations around that, here you're a professional here to do a job, you have some skills, and you'll get paid for your time, right? And you'll go on to do other things, and that the work you're doing has some meaning and value, but maybe not on the daily. That it's something that you get to see, right? That those notions maybe something that we need to just normalize. But for someone who's looking to build a career here, what are there any resources that you would recommend in particular? There's something they should read, course they should take up, or even they should anything.
Look, I have to admit, I'm a bit of a millennial, so maybe you guys are rolling your eyes at this, right? Some of my favorite publications include like Tech Policy Press, really, really good for global trends. I love Medianama. I think my entire career, I have, for a large part, just my first port of call to understand something that I don't know anything about would be Medianama. It's very clear. I think FPF, the Future of Privacy Forum, they have a really interesting blog. I love following their work again, because it gives you a ringside view of global developments. Then in terms of newsletters and podcasts, the Morning Brew is a really good one. I love it. I think it gives you a really succinct summary of interesting things that are happening in the world. I also think Business Wars and Pivot, again, these are two different podcasts, are really interesting. I love Business Wars especially because it basically deep dives into businesses, right? And tells you about, you learn so much, for instance, about a company vis-a-vis their competitor. And in that process, you learn so much about their value proposition, their philosophies, all of that. It's really, really well told as well. Land of the Giants is also a series. They take one company at a time. So cool. And then there are some more like old school ones. I think, like, for instance, Ikigai Law, right? They do a blog. It's pretty old school, but it's a really comprehensive blog. It's high quality. I really like it. And even like Internet Freedom Foundation, their blog as well. Of course, their point of view is that of a civil society organization, which is an important one. But again, all of their content I find is well researched, annotated, high quality. So yeah, these are the ones that I tend to read. Agreed.
Very A1, like, in terms of sources and platforms that you could refer to, especially from a tech policy perspective. Maybe I'll just add, for if the audience is slightly more generic, like, just not just tech policy, then in my understanding, one of the doyens of policy in India is Professor Ajay Shah, right? His book, In Service of the Republic. It's like, that's a phenomenal resource. So someone looking at this get started, that like the basics of policy, right? That where should you step in? What is a market failure? And basics, right? That what exactly is policy to begin with. Maybe that. Final question. And I'll just keep it very open-ended, right? Because again, it's something I'm looking forward to here as well. Any piece of advice
Yeah.
for someone looking to build a career here, like, from your decade-long journey or so, something that you picked up?
And I feel like a dinosaur, thank you. But I think, look, in general, it's not being formulaic is helpful, right? Like, for instance, what I might say today may not hold in 10 years. And my journey was 10 years ago. Frankly, the space was so different and reality changes so quickly, especially in tech, right? So I think with that in mind, I'd say in general, being proactive is always helpful. Building relationships is great. I don't know. And I think also, like, Yash, you know this really well. You do this really well. Shooting your shot is really nice as well, right? If you think you want to do a job, like, write the person an email. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to sound like a drone sort of doling out advice per se, but yeah, obviously I'm happy to help anyone that wants to reach out. But yeah, in general, I'd say that, just doing the thing, being yourself is helpful, right? I think reflecting a lot is helpful as well.
I'm sorry, I'll just cheat and ask a small thing one last time, which is, you have not done a master's, right?
I have not done a master's. This is my favorite subject to talk about. Yes. Yeah.
And it has never been a ceiling or hindrance at all.
I mean, look, I'm still in the middle of my career, so time will tell. Okay. But so far, yeah, I don't feel I haven't felt any hindrance in the way that I've, been received as a professional in any setting. Yeah, it's just been, I find that maybe, especially the time that I was getting my bachelor's degree, it was very much a thing to get like a Harvard MPAID or MPP degree, right? Or getting like a really fancy Ivy League degree. But I have found that, like somewhere in the middle, frankly, even I wanted to get a master's. But before I could go ahead and do it, I was very dissuaded by the financial implication of getting a master's. So I didn't pursue that. And before I could even do it, I actually got my role at Amazon, which then put me on a path which seemed like leaving that and then taking on a loan and getting a master's would have been a suboptimal trade-off, And the learnings that I was having, just being in the company and watching the business and engaging in the issues and debates, and frankly, just building relationships with government directly, those things are much more valuable from the perspective of somebody hiring, right? And where did you get your master's? Like literally nobody, that never comes up in any interview or any potential discussion. But I don't get a master's. By all means, if somebody is intellectually curious about a particular thing, go and do it, right? I'm sure it's very helpful. So this whole thing about like building a global network and stuff is really good too. It just wasn't my life, So
I'm just at this stage myself, and so often try and figure with this. But nonetheless, thank you so much for your time, Uttara. This has been really, really helpful, and I'm sure our audience will enjoy a lot. For everyone who's watching, please do, we'll share Uttara's LinkedIn ID link in the description. Feel free to reach out to her. She's one of the most helpful people I know of, right? But please be judicious with her time as well. So, and yeah.
No, I am not that busy. It's all good.
And any questions you might have in the comments, everything, right? And anyone you think we should have as guests for the next episode. But thank you again, Uttara. This really means a lot.
Thank you, Yash. Really, really grateful for speaking to you.
Thank you so much. We'll see you. Take care.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye-bye.